Felix here, guys. Good evening. Welcome to NIO Saturday. Good evening here from Hong Kong. Good morning to probably a lot of you guys. Welcome. Thanks for joining in. I can see a lot of familiar faces here already. Esteban, great to have you on here. Arian, you have 60 or only 16. Okay, and you have $2,000 in NIO. Well, congratulations for investing at that age. That's fantastic. So what do we actually have here? We are, of course, going to look at the numbers. Before we do that, let me just say this is not financial advice, guys. This is just for entertainment only. As always, we're going to talk about absolutely everything NIO and everything else that you guys want to shout out. So as always, guys, these are Q&As. These are interactive, so don't be shy. Ginny X, Philco here. Good evening to one of our lovely members there. Great to have you on the chat, Philco. So we should, of course, look at the JP Morgan coverage also, which is also out. Some job hires from Europe, which are quite insightful. NIO's actual numbers. We can look at the technical analysis. We're going to see everything that's going on. And then I imagine we're going to digress into all the other things you guys have questions about. Ginny X, Mike, Shoeless Joe, good evening, afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. Great to have you on the chat. So why don't we... before we get to the numbers in just a second here, just have a quick look at this. This was also on our Discord earlier. I posted that this morning. I think this is pretty exciting because these are the 3 NIO job ads they put out today. Normally, they actually put out more than 3 in a day, but it is a Saturday after all. And these are all in Europe. So 2 in England, in Oxford, engineers, which is exciting in itself, but not that exciting. The German one is the one that I find really exciting because it is for an EU Service Coordinator Supervisor, EU standing for the European Union, which is a sort of hodgepodge of, I think it's 28 countries by now. And what does that mean? Well, it means that they are planning very actively and aggressively a Europe-wide rollout, because otherwise it would be called Norway Service Coordinator, or perhaps Northern Europe or Scandinavia Service Coordinator. But no, it's called EU, which means, i.e., 28 countries. I'm not saying they're going to necessarily go into all 28 countries immediately, but it certainly goes to show a much faster rollout than I'd anticipated across Europe. And this role, again, it's in Germany, whereas most of the hires we've seen have been in Scandinavia, generally speaking, in Norway, and just the one chap up in Denmark. So that's, to me, I think actually quite a big piece of news there in that one little job ad. So I wanted to share that with you. Felix, am I applying for NIO? No, I don't really want to move to Bavaria at this point, although Munich is probably the loveliest city in Germany. And I think I can say that because I'm from Hamburg. So yeah, if you are in the UK and you are a vehicle engineer or some sort of service coordinator, go for it. And I think that's quite a nice item here. And then we will also, Chris earlier posted this fantastic article here from JP Morgan Roundup. So we'll put that just below Richard Hammond here. We will look at that also. But I guess what you've all come for is really the news release here, the numbers. So we will go through that. TAP, a big welcome. And Calm Menno also, hello, welcome to this chat. This here, I got that email at 6 a.m. and I posted it, well, that's probably New York time, 6 p.m. Hong Kong time. And I think I posted it at, what time? 6:12. Okay, it took me 12 minutes. Okay, a little bit slow, but I think I was doing something else. Anyway, what are the numbers for April? 7,102 vehicles delivered in April. That's increasing 125% year on year. That's cumulative deliveries. As of now, since NIO time began, 102,803 vehicles. And then they tell us how much per car. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to pull up the historic numbers because it's always good to put these things into perspective. And this, of course, is on our Patreon. That's what I just clicked on here. We got delivery numbers, earnings, and rating trackers on there. So let's put this in here. Here we have monthly car deliveries. So we're going to put April here, April 21. And we have, let me just pull this up here again. Where did he go? Where did he go? Here he is. We have, okay, 3,163 ES6s. So that's This one, 3,163 year sixes. That's a slight improvement over March, not a huge amount, but slightly. We have 1,523 ES8, 1523. Sorry, that's the wrong one. 1523 here on that. So that's almost exactly the same as in March. And then 2416 for the EC6. So 2416. So slightly lower there on that one. And then let's just drag that over here. And that tells us that month on month, okay, we are down 2%. But bear in mind, this is a chip shortage land. So solid number, I would say. I think that's a pretty solid number. Imagine if you take this out across the next 2 months, let's just say, okay, that doesn't work that way. Then you would have that one here times 3. That would be 21,306. Now, the guidance for Q2 that William Lee gave us just, when was it? Yesterday? Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday morning, wasn't it? That lovely earnings call. It was 21,000 to 22,000. So I've put up here a forecast of 22,000. That's a little optimistic. I should probably put in 21,000 to 22,000 so we can understand that. And I'm hoping that they have a little bit up their sleeve. They've been rather clever with their March delivery numbers. If you remember that, they sort of lowballed it and then they increased it afterwards, and then the market was happy about it. So that's really what I'm hoping for, that they are being a bit conservative here with that number. But that's very, very much on ballpark. So I think that gives us confidence that delivery numbers are not falling off a cliff because they're missing some parts here. So I'm rather happy with that. Harvu, a big welcome there. Martin Kuzugin, morning, Felix. Do you have any further info about NIO Park? Is it all for NIO? Doesn't 50,000 workers to produce 1 million vehicles seem like a lot? Martin's there. So the question was answered on the earnings call at the end of that. If you want to go back to that video of mine, I've put in the title where the Q&A starts. Just listen to that bit. That's really the insightful part. And they literally did an hour of Q&As. I couldn't believe it. It was the longest earnings call ever, but super, super interesting because the analyst asked all the questions that we were talking about in the chat. That's exactly the question everybody wanted to know. So the answer from William Lee is this. NIO Park with an E, as you spelled it very correctly here, is paid for. Okay, that's the first thing. It's paid for. The infrastructure and the buildings are built and paid for by the government. NIO doesn't pay for that. The factory fit out is then paid for by JAC. So again, NIO doesn't pay for that. I love this business model. You just make the margin on the branding. You don't put up any of the capex virtually. He said, if we grow quickly enough, it's our park. If we fail, then they're going to bring in somebody else because it is going to be government property, going to be government land. But provided NIO grows quickly enough, as in the way we are planning to grow, this is going to become a NIO Park with an I, essentially. And it is for, of course, NIO's manufacturing. It's going to be for battery assembly. It's going to be for all the parts suppliers. So there'll be lots of companies on that site, but there will be suppliers supplying the NIO factory. And if you have a factory that eventually will put out 1 million cars, you need a huge amount of supplies. And he said just on the batteries alone, the logistics cost saving is $100 per car. And what I read before was that it was apparently $450 per car saving. Now you might be thinking, well, that's not really a lot, is it? Well, do you know what 450 times 1 million is? It's $450 million per year saving just because your entire supply chain is basically within walking distance. And of course, the other advantage there, and that's also what William Lee was stressing, is that it just makes everything more efficient. It makes your cooperations with your partners much, much more efficient because say you're working on, batteries and you're working with CATL, which is likely. If CATL has the battery factory and their staff on site, you can have lunch together every other day. You R&D guys with their R&D guys. If there's an issue, you can walk over to the factory. They come and see how you manufacture and stuff. You just have a much, much closer linkage between your supply chain and your actual manufacturing. So I really think that is the greatest gift that the government could have given NIO to just build them this park. And of course, the existing manufacturing is still there, right, with that 300,000 car capacity by the end of this year. But after that, that's where we're going to go. So basically, all the new product launches that we expect to see, smaller sedans, MPVs, all that stuff, that will come out of the NIO Park with an E, and it will be just much, much more efficient. Perhaps we might even see them, eventually close down the manufacturing that the JAC has at the moment, that they're expanding to 300,000. But that might be a little bit further down the road. There might be advantages in having two sites as well. So TAP, you're absolutely right. It is for other companies, but at the moment, the intention is that NIO will be the only OEM, the only car manufacturer there. There will be, of course, JAC on site, the guys making the batteries and the roofs and the glass and this bit and that bit. And, there are hundreds and hundreds of components in a car like that that come from the supply chain. And that's why governments actually like the car industry, because it doesn't just create jobs from the car manufacturer, but it creates thousands of jobs down the road. Now, as to your question of isn't 50,000 people a lot? So they're saying 10,000 R&D people, which is NIO will have an actual R&D center there. They'll all be in the same place. Again, that's advantageous. And think about all the things that they have to R&D, right? So they need teams for software, for engineering, for autonomous driving, for cloud, for the data connection. There's loads of tech and software in there. So it's a software company. Plus, you need all the engineering teams. You need teams designing all the new cars and all that. So you do need a lot of people. And that's they were already told us they would ramp up R&D expenditure to $1 billion this year, $2 billion the year after, and it's going to basically keep going up. Now, 40,000 workers, those are not NIO workers, right? You have, of course, NIO's XPT type plant where they make the battery packs and they make the powertrains and all those core components, which are NIO owned. The others will be JAC employees that do the assembly. And then, all the workers at the battery factory and the workers at the tire factory and the workers at the, what have you not factory. So all those suppliers will, of course, have their own employees. So that's how you come to this number of 50,000. Lee, okay, you want us to summarize quickly the earnings report? We're actually going to do that just in a second. There is a fantastic JP Morgan article out on the Discord, which we are going to go through. Robert, fantastic to have you on the call. Nice to see you. RM is welcoming the dip with open arms. The cheaper it stays, the better. Well, yes, I mean, there is, of course, still the dip since February. At the moment, I think this is a sort of a mini dip here. Muscle Doc, good morning. Fantastic to have you on here. Happy NIO Saturday. I've changed my name from Julian to Gemal Rainer Block. Okay, in that case, thank you very much. Is it Gimal? It's good to have you on here. I know who you are. Zavi is asking, is the stock market rigged? It is free market capitalism, so therefore people can massage things one way or the other. Absolutely. Mingo Stephen, first month where there wasn't record deliveries, all predicted due to semi-shortages and hopefully priced in precisely. We are basically going to flatline these numbers, I think, around that sort of 7,100 to 7,200. Maybe in June or so, they're going to throw in a bit of a surprise and give us 7,800 or something like that. And then we all jump up and down and get excited about it. But you are basically going to see a pretty flat numbers there. But given that February was Chinese New Year, 5,500, we are still going to see quarter-on-quarter growth. Not as dramatic, but there will still be growth. Janne is asking about Norwegians, the entry into Norway. The answer for that is this one here. International launch press conference live stream on the 6th of May. That's happening here this is Hong Kong time, 4 p.m. So don't worry about that. Just go onto my channel, guys. Set a reminder. It's that easy. Click, and there you are. Or simply hit subscribe and turn on your alerts, and then you also get the notification. But that's when they're really going to tell us everything on that front. Can NIO compete with Tesla's battery technology, says Carmeno there. Well, both companies are buying battery components from the same supplier, CATL. Now, CATL is actually an investor in NIO, and NIO is an investor in CATL. So they have a pretty close linkage there. So I think there's a fairly level playing field there. Okay, fantastic, guys. So on that note, so here are the numbers. Let's quickly, because this also summarizes very much the actual earnings call here. This is an article out which Chris is very kindly, one of our lovely members, very kindly shared with us, and it's probably just about big enough you can read it. Not the greatest resolution here on that. So hop over to the Discord, guys, if you want to get it there first, and then brighter, clearer resolution. The way to get there, as always, guys, is through the Patreon. So what is JP Morgan saying here? And JP Morgan, I just want to point out, it's the world's largest bank, the world's largest investment bank, the world's third largest financial institution after Visa and MasterCard, which are different beasts. So in some sense, it is the world's largest financial institution here, really. Saying a clean beat in the midst of industry headwinds. NIO's share price has pulled back 36% since recent peaks in mid-Feb, similar to the broader China OEMs, so the car manufacturers, but underperforming the MSCN, so the Chinese index generally, which was down 13%. So narratives at the company's Q1 results call today, despite a clean beat, which means, good numbers, beating expectations, mostly surrounded two major industry headwinds, which not only sent China auto stocks down, but in some cases pressured the company's margins. So they're talking about Great Wall here, BYD, the Buffett invested one, and SAIC, all had worse margins because they're saying it's costing us more to buy batteries, it's costing us more to buy chips. So the number one here is chip shortages and production outlook, and two, profitability from here. In light of elevated material prices, production loss due to type chip or battery supply and heightened industry competition. So those they are talking about, Great Wall, BYD, etc. NIO surprisingly has managed all these well in Q1 with record high vehicle gross margins, 21% versus JP Morgan's estimate of 17%. And that was driven by a higher take rate in the 100 kilowatt battery. So people are upgrading from the 70 kilowatt batteries to the 100 kilowatt hour battery, and they're paying more for that. And they're paying more for that subscription. And that, again, I think shows the beauty of that subscription model. It isn't all cost, as what people are always talking about. It is just means people who buy NIOs generally have a pretty high income. They have spare cash. They want to upgrade to the best tech that's available, and they'll continue to do that, I think, and therefore we are going to get margins moving up. And secondly, NIO Pilot options. So again, more people paying for the NIO Pilot subscription. And they contain their bill of materials, so they haven't really paid more for chips or batteries or any other components. Shipment guidance for the second quarter is trimmed slightly, down 4 to 4.5%, 4 to 5%, but it's in line with JP Morgan's estimates, so it's already priced in, which is what somebody said here very smartly. All in all, our sector investment strategy remains unchanged. We'll be looking for signs of sequential improvement in chip supply from the current shortage to potential tightness. So tightness is better than shortage before a complete casing either towards year end or first half of 2022. So JP Morgan thinks either by the year end this problem will be gone completely or first half of 2022. Our base case is that such an inflection point could potentially emerge in the summer. So that's very soon, which if it materializes should mark the bottom of the car manufacturers' stock performance. In the meantime, we would park our money in selected premium car dealers. Okay, that's perhaps slightly beyond the point. I don't think many of you are invested in Dongsheng or Yongda. Longer term, we remain our positive thesis on NIO and expect the company to deliver 106% this year volume growth and 93% volume growth in 2022. Respectively, with rising revenue from content monetization from the first quarter of 2022 onwards. And that's important because the ET7 is going to come out in the first quarter next year, and that will have autonomous driving and therefore that additional subscription revenue. We lift our 2021 estimates slightly to reflect strong margin trajectory following the Q1 beat. Stay OW, overweight. investment bankers struggle with long words, it seems. So they have to abbreviate everything. And then here, key initiative guidance versus JP Morgan's estimates. The charging network expansion again here, 500 battery swap stations are going to come out. There's 600 supercharging stations and 15,000 destination chargers by the end of this year. And JP Morgan says, estimate says, we believe a fast-growing and robust ecosystem comprising of charging networks and value-added services will improve customers' experience and ultimately offer NIO business monetization opportunities. So I think they see here, what I also see is that the battery swap stations will eventually be used by other companies also. And for that, they're going to have to pay NIO a fee. For example, second volume management guided Q2 to reach 21 to 22,000 units, which is in line with our expectations. So again, they weren't shocked by that at all. And then here's the summary for you, Lily. The Q1 results highlights. Total revenue was 20% up quarter on quarter. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but you have to bear in mind that the Q4 for a car company is the major quarter. Everybody buys cars at the end of the year for some reason. Q1 is typically a smaller quarter than Q4. So having 20% growth from Q4 to Q1 means a lot more than in any other quarter. Yeah, so it's actually, that's revenue up 20% and volume up only 15%. So that's the margin improvement. You can see that there, right? You see a difference between volume growth and revenue growth. It's margin and also higher average sales prices for cars. And part of that will be they're buying, higher end specs here. So, and the higher end batteries. Vehicle margins saw further improvement in Q1, and the gross vehicle margin here increased to 21.2%. That's really pretty good. That's sort of BMW level or something like that. And think how many cars they make and how many years they've been making them using rather old tech. From 70%, thanks mainly to operational leverage and higher take rate of the 100 kilowatt battery and NIO Pilot. So they remain on target here for $70. So I think pretty impressive numbers. And let me just show you guys, if we look at my discounted cash flow model here, because I want to just show you how those numbers fit into what I've been estimating. Can you see that? Let me see if I make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's probably better for you guys. So I've got a price target at $82, which is a little bit on the bullish side. I appreciate that. So for 2021, I have a revenue growth of 148%. These guys have 103%, if I remember correctly. Where was it? 106%. So they're not quite as bullish on this year. And then for next year, they have 93%. I've got 90%. So similar-ish, I would say. And in my model here, I'm not taking into account any autonomous driving revenue, any subscription revenue from the ET7 for 2022, because I was being a bit cautious of exactly when that's going to get rolled out. We will see at the end of this year in China, the level 4 trucks moving out onto the roads using level 3. What does level 3 mean? It basically means you're going to be sitting back, slightly semi-asleep trucker, and he's just going to watch a monitor. And the system will tell him when he needs to do something. So pretty much he's just going to sit there and watch a screen and never ever touch any pedals, brakes, steering wheel. So that's the level where China is from a regulatory point of view, not just from a tech point of view. So I do think, therefore, that also for the cars, that's going to happen pretty quickly. And actually, doing it first with trucks makes a huge amount of sense. Why? Because trucks move all the time. So the mileage collected and the data collected by trucks is much, much higher. So therefore, China will collect all that data and they'll be able to see just how safe it is and improve the general system and regulation quicker than if you have passenger cars doing autonomous driving first. It really makes sense to start with commercial trucks because they don't stand still, right? So Genie X is also saying that in April there are 5 days less. There was Tomb Sweeping Day. There was indeed, yes, which is a sort of worshipping ancestors sort of day where people go to their ancestors' graves and sweep them. It's a rather descriptive title. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And there were also there was a 5-day shutdown. 1 day of that was a holiday anyway. And then in the other days, apparently they retooled the factory, but I don't know. Anyway, they put that story out that they shut down because they didn't have some components arrive. AT Fefi here, welcome. Martin is saying, do you think robotaxis will require higher than the $100 per month subscription fee? Well, I think robotaxis will have a higher license fee, likely. It depends on how it's structured, right? So say, would NIO or a subsidiary own a robotaxi fleet? Or would they sell robotaxis to, say, DIDA, perhaps, which is sort of the lift of China, which, again, NIO Capital, the private equity arm, is invested in. There's also another limousine service that NIO is invested in. Or NIO Capital, rather, I should say, which is, let me just show you that here. The NIO Capital arm that's a pretty interesting private equity side. Let me change this to English, and then investments. And here we go. So that's the trucks Inceptio. And then Alton are the guys building the battery swapping stations. Dida Shuqing is basically the lift of China. It's the number 2 in the market. DD with 2 I's is the company that bought Uber out in China. So they are the dominant player. But there is also another one on here somewhere, which is here, Shuqi Limousine and Chauffeur Service. So they are invested in 2 of them there that might therefore logically buy NIOs and will then have to, I imagine it'll be a charge by the mile or by the kilometer rather, because that is the model that Inceptio is using for the trucks. So they are basically licensing out those sensors and the data and the cloud and all of that, and then the trucks simply pay a fee per kilometer and mile. So I think that would make a lot of sense also for the robo-taxi fleets. Is there a credible ETA for NIO solid-state batteries, says Shoeless Joe? Well, actually, that question also came up, and the answer was pretty much we are on target. But we didn't really get any additional data for that. I think the end of 2022 or something like that, or mid-2022, I don't think it'll be purely solid. I think it'll be more solid than what we have now. So it'll be sort of a semi-solid, and that's kind of what William Lee has indicated previously. So it'll be some sort of hybrid in between. How many cars did they deliver in April, says Thomas. Welcome. Let me just pull it up for you again here. Where was it? Where is it? It's also here on the Discord. I posted it earlier today. So there you go. 7,102 vehicles, or I can simply, perhaps more interestingly, show you here. That's April here, so you can see 7,100 vehicles. ES8, pretty much identical. ES6, a couple or more, and then a little bit less on the EC6. But, pretty similar numbers here to March. Lily is asking, how do you think NIO Park will affect the PT of NIO? Sorry, PT, what's PT? Price target. Price target of NIO, especially long term. Look, to me, it shows they are thinking and planning to producing beyond 1 million cars per year. And in my model, we don't get there till 2025. So that's why I'm rather excited by it, because phase 1 will take him a year to build, and perhaps say that as is phase 2 and phase 3, in which case it would take, you have that capacity out by sort of mid-22, mid-24 or so. So by mid-24, we might have a capacity of 1.3 million cars or more, in which case perhaps they are actually planning on growing at more than 90% a year in terms of revenue, which is what I'm modeling out here, which would be very, very exciting. They could do that, I think, if they launch more cars, different shape and size of cars, so the smaller sedans and the MPVs, and if they also bring out a mass market brand, which is, I think, very, very much at the forefront of William Lee's thoughts. So therefore, I think if you see, it's a bit like, look at Tesla. Tesla says, hey, we're building a gigafactory in Berlin and here and there and everywhere. And people are not like, well, that's capital expenditure. Why do you do that? Well, people are like, okay. They're planning on selling a lot of cars in Europe. They're planning on selling a lot of cars here. So to me, that's kind of the similar way of looking at it. They're not paying for it, really. It has hardly costing them anything at all. And I just think it means they are serious about getting to that 1 million cars a year level and beyond. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother with it. So, the Pony AI GDX, thank you very much. There are some good videos out on that, on the AI there. Anson, what's your price target for the end of the year for NIO? Well, I've still got this discounted cash flow model up here at $82. I think really, if you take into account the current chip shortage, I think we are more likely at $60 at this present time in terms of times forward. Now, Deutsche has us, JP Morgan has us at 70, but that's until 2022. So I think it is probably somewhere in that range. I think $60 would be feasible and reasonable, particularly, and a lot of that hinges on what guidance we get given in beginning of Q2 and then throughout the summer and as we get into the autumn. If we see an easing of the chip supply tightness and they say we've got chips and we've got batteries, and you see the delivery numbers by month pick up, and they actually don't need to pick up all that much because look at what we've got so far this year is, let me show you here. So already this year, we've got 27,000 cars. So I think the stock would really rally if we hit 100,000 cars, because most analysts are now expecting somewhere in the 90,000 range. So what is required for that? Well, we've got 4 months out already, so that leaves us with 8 months, right? So we divide that by 8, and you actually only need to deliver 9,000 cars per month on average. So a couple of great months at the end of the year, and you get there. And if you look at the ramp up at the end of last year, we went from 5,000 cars in October to 7,000 cars in December. That's pretty substantial, right? We had a 32% increase from November to December. So if you see something like that, then I think we could actually break through $60, $70 and sort of go off flying, particularly if we then might, get a lot more information on the ET7 and they're going to be saying, hey, this is really sold out. It's deliveries for the next 6 months are basically booked, that sort of thing. And we get, again, people start to realize the subscription revenue that's going to flow in from that. And likely, I think we will also have another NIO day this year where they possibly might announce another car. They are working allegedly on a sedan and also on an MPV, which is sort of a 7-seater, a very high-end people carrier / minibus, as Robert calls it. So you guys are talking about NIO or NIO. Yeah, it is rather confusing now. We have a lot of NEOs and a lot of NIOs, right? So thanks for explaining that there, guys. So I think conservatively, I would sort of say $60, I think is feasible. If we get some fireworks towards the end of the year, perhaps at the end of Q3 or beginning of Q4, I still think we could go beyond that. But it depends a little bit on external factors, chips, etc. Right, guys. Apologies if I missed some of your questions. Do feel free to shout them out again. Thank you for all of that. So we're going up next week, correct? As bear fucker. Is that fucker? Okay. Love that. What does NIO stand for, Angelo? I think Angelo is probably asking about the NIO Park, Robert, perhaps. So the NIO Park is spelled N-E-O, not N-I-O, but just to confuse us all, which is, again, separate for NIO Performance Materials, which is a rare earth company. Muscle Dog, hi Robert. Hopefully they'll build a second park in another province place for redundancy purposes, Genie X. I think from an efficiency point of view, it makes a lot of sense to have everything in one place, to be honest with you, because if you're thinking that they are paying, more than $100 at the moment just to move one battery pack from supplier to the factory, you don't really want to have that kind of waste, because what's the point, right? So I think it makes sense. It's a site that is 12 times the size of Tesla's Fremont facility, and that's a pretty big site. I don't know if have you looked on a map of that? Tesla Fremont, that is a huge site here, and this one is just going to be 12 times the size of that. So let me make this a satellite, and here it is. This is the Tesla factory, right? This little bit here. So if I zoom out a little bit, and you just imagine you take that, you make it 4 times as wide and 3 times as high, so bigger than my screen allows. So this area here and across 4 times would be the NIO industrial park. So an absolute monster of a park in one location. NIO Day may announce intentions of forward relationship. Yes, also, I think, again, that's positive. And I think you are going to see more people, I think, using their infrastructure, battery swapping. And if they do take the battery swapping, they will also have to buy, or at the very least pay for a license for NIO's battery pack components, because they make that. I know a lot of people say NIO doesn't make anything, and I always think that is such a strange thing that people put that out there, that there isn't an actual factory in there. So this is XPT, which is a NIO subsidiary, and they make basically the engines, if you will, the power trains. All of the, I'm not an engineer, as you can obviously tell, but basically the motor, and then here the high power induction motor, and then what we're talking about here, the ESS. That is here rather fancy, a little animation here. That's the battery pack, right? You see the little blocks on the inside that look like gold bars? That's what they buy from CATL. And Tesla does the same thing. They buy those components from CATL, and then they package it. And then you can see here very nicely all the bits to it. The little cooling system. That's the cooling system down there. Then you get, and then the charging parts here on the side, that is all XPT that builds that. And then the very fact that they're swappable. So it's going to show you here in a second exactly how that works. So that system, how that plugs in, and you can pop that in and out automatically, that is NIO technology, so they can license that. There's also a ticker called NIO, yes, Lily, which is actually a really interesting company because they make electric bikes and phenomenally successful. So again, yes, Lily, there is a lot of N and I and an O and E and O and that sort of thing. So very, very confusing for people who are new to the space. Lily is saying, is Baidu a good buy? It's relatively cheap at the moment. They are the only company in China with a working robo-taxi fleet that's properly out there and licensed. I know Alibaba has a smaller little test thing, but they have one that isn't the test thing, that is actually working and driving out there. So they are quite far ahead in the autonomous driving space. Do you see NIO building factories in Europe, says Shooters Joe? Yes and no, if I can give that very clear answer. Why do I say yes and no? Because I think the cost savings of building it in China are tremendous, also from a supply chain point of view. It might become a tariff issue eventually, and it might be advantageous to do some sort of assembly in Europe. And for example, say, battery packs cost the same in Europe as they do in China. You might ship components of the car over. You buy components at the same price in Europe, and you have some sort of assembly line there. And therefore, you might qualify for the sort of made in Europe stamp, and therefore you don't have to pay such high import tariffs. So I think something like that is possible. And of course, eventually, once supply reaches a certain point, it might make sense. But bear in mind, there are huge industries in the world that run on entirely Chinese supply chains, and it works. And most people who order a car don't mind waiting 3 months for it. That's basically what the Western car manufacturers have taught you. If you are in Germany and you order a BMW, it'll take you 3 months to get it, which is bizarre, given that it's only a couple of 100 miles away from you. So in China, they think they could make it faster. They could ship it to you on a ferry in about 3 to 4 weeks, and they'd have that cost saving there. So I think in the long run, you might see some assembly, and certainly once numbers reach a certain level, you might see governments pressuring them to do more stuff locally, at which point I think they will. It'll also give them a branding advantage. I mean, Tesla putting a factory into Germany, I think, is a very, very clever move, because the Germans hate all cars that aren't German. I'm generalizing. I am German, so I think I can slag us off a little bit here. But you don't see American cars on the road. You see some Japanese, the occasional French, but it's very, very much a German system. So for them to put Tesla into Germany means that Germans think they're buying German Tesla, and therefore they're going to be quite happy with that. What are the delivery numbers? GB, you just joined. Okay, let me pull that up for you again, wherever it was. Here it is, 7,102 vehicles. And again, look at it. I've put it in here as April month by month, so you can see the comparison to previous months here. Well within expectations. We are told 21 to 22,000 cars for this quarter. So 7,102 has us bang on target here. Here saying NIO in Norway this month, but still a bit confusion because NIO can't deliver enough only in China with this chip problem. I don't think that won't be noticeable this year. Yeah, I don't think the numbers sold in Norway or perhaps even other countries this year in Europe are going to make a huge dent to delivery numbers. I agree with you there. But you need to launch, you need to build your infrastructure, you need to train your staff, you need to have a NIO house, you need to do branding and marketing, you need to get, the first 100 cars are the hardest, you need to get them rolling out, you need to have your engineers, your services, you need to have all that set up and rolled out, and it takes time. And then you need to plan for all the other countries, you need to set up companies, do the tax planning, hire people. This is a fairly lengthy process. So it's good that they're doing it. I like the fact they're doing it reasonably early, and it'll set them up perhaps 6 months later, 12 months later down the track, when hopefully this chip shortage, certainly at least for NIO, will have abated somewhat to be able to deliver a substantial number of cars. And think about it at the moment, 7,100 cars. If they were to sell, say, 700 cars into Europe, that would lift revenue by 10%, right? So that would be significant. So I think it makes sense for them to explore this fairly early rather than sort of sit on their hand and wait. Stockmo is a very smart man, says Ted. He's certainly a very entertaining chap. You guys are talking about MP materials. It does seem a bit of a SPAC hangover. Yes. What do you think will be the PPS end of year? PPS. What's PPS? Price. Tell me what PPS is, Neil, and I will gladly give you my point of view on that. Here, why don't I read your question? Because I've only just gotten to it. So there we are. No need to have crying smileys if I'm talking about something else. Just repost it. I don't mind. And Tyrone is saying you don't think Kathy will be adding NIO in the coming years. I think they've just been buying price per share. Thank you. I'll get to that question just in a second. ARK has been buying Tesla again the last couple of days. I've been posting that over on our Tesla Discord, which I think is interesting, and it shows that they are continue to be bullish on that here. I think this one might be from today. Tesla here, they bought another 50,000 shares here. I think there was another one down here somewhere. This is not a full screenshot. So are they going to go into NIO? I think as long as Tesla grows at the current phenomenal rate in China, I think they will think Chinese EV market exposure, tick. Because Tesla is, one of the leaders in that space. Should Tesla struggle a little bit in the Chinese market, and I kind of don't think that they will, I think at that point it'll be more interesting for them, because then they're going to get more differentiation. Otherwise, I think to them, they're probably going to stick to their Tesla. Price per share, what do you think the price per share will be by the end of the year, says Neil there? Okay, gladly. So my discounted cash flow model has me at 82. But to be honest with you, I think if you take into account the chip shortage, I think we might more likely be at the sort of $60 mark. If we get fireworks towards the end of Q2 or beginning of Q3, as in we are going to get 10,000 cars delivered per month, that sort of thing, and people realize the ET7 coming out and that extra subscription revenue and things like that, we might then see that year-end rally that takes us above $70 or where some of the analyst price targets are. At the moment, I'm a little bit conservative at around $60, I would say, because we just don't know. And when we don't know, the market hates uncertainty. The market tends to kind of sit there. And if you look at the volume it has been fairly flat down here. We have not had a huge amount of volume. We have these kind of periods when we go up, when we rally, and we sort of hang about. Not many people are jumping in on it, basically. Ted, that's very kind of you to say. Norway is not a big country. That's indeed true. Minskell there, Norway is not a big country. Why do they go to Norway first? Well, Norway has a more than 50% EV uptake rate. So more than 1 in 2 of each car sold is an EV. A very, very lenient or supportive government policy there, which is ironic because Norway is an oil country, right? They make all their money with oil, and they're putting the money into subsidizing an EV industry. So I think, therefore, Scandinavia is a logical place to start. If I had to bet on where they would go afterwards, I would say Denmark. Again, not the hugest country in the world, but again, very, very supportive towards EVs. And the chap they hired to run European operations, who used to work for Tesla, by the way, he's based in Denmark. I used to also work for Harley Davidson before that, so he's been in this sort of not quite auto space, but you know what I mean, mobility space or whatever you want to call it nowadays. And I suppose the third country might perhaps be the Netherlands, because again, very, very encouraging government there, and all countries without domestic car manufacturing industries. I think that's also important. Therefore, they're like, we're going to let in the Germans or the Chinese or the Americans. We don't really care, right? It's all going to be foreign made anyway, so let's just go for it. So you have less issues in those countries, whereas when you go into Germany and France, who have strong domestic car industries, you are going to get a bit more headwind politically, I would imagine. Angela, Jamie Kramer was questioning why China has not experienced a chip shortage like the rest of the world. Well, a lot of the chip shortage is caused by this decoupling. That's, American, Chinese governments squabbling over stuff. That's what's made this worse. There are also other aspects to it. When we went into COVID at the beginning of the year, from my point of view, a lot of the semiconductor manufacturers stopped their investments and expansions because they thought, well, we're going to see a decline, certainly in the auto industry. And what did we see? Well, we saw people mining Bitcoin like crazy. Everybody bought entertaining devices for home, home computers, laptops, whatever, Xboxes, all using lots of chips. And the car industry recovered very, very quickly. So even those cheap little $1 chips are now in demand. And people, the economy has been relatively good through this period. You get the same little chips are in all your white goods and your washing machines and, dishwashers. They all have these little chips in them. So the demand is an issue. China is, of course, a manufacturer of a lot of them. So more manufacturing, you have an advantage. You have a home advantage, right? And the Taiwanese also control a lot of that supply. Where all the Taiwanese factories? Well, they are mostly in China. So I think, therefore, China is in a slightly better position there. Who gets hit hardest by this? Well, the biggest companies. If you are, if you make 10 million cars a year, you're going to feel this more than if you make 7,000 a month. Also, NIO can simply afford to pay $2 per chip because they're only buying 7,000. Well, actually, they don't buy 7,000. I think they're about 60 of them in a car. But even if they don't pay $60, but $120 a car on that chip, it's still kind of like, yeah, so we're going to sell that car for $60,000. Does it really matter? We'd rather roll the car out. So whereas if you are making mass market cars like a Toyota on very, very tight margins, and you have to then pay, say they make, 1 million cars, 2 million cars a month, 2 million cars a month, and you have an extra $60, that's 120 million a month. So they're in a different position. So therefore, actually, these kind of smaller, nimbler EVs, for them, it's slightly less of an issue, I would say. Robert, Felix, almost 18,000 subscribers. Felix to the moon. Robert, thank you very much. And you are, of course, an early subscriber, guys. So I truly appreciate that. So smash that subscribe button, guys. Also click the like button if you enjoy the coverage. And let's get over that 18,000 mark. That's an exciting one indeed. Okay, I think I skipped a couple of questions here. 2032 NIO will profit, Daniel. Okay. Okay, lots of questions here. Let me just scroll up a little bit again. Felix, can you send me your Discord address, please? Tyrone, it should be at the top of this live chat, if I'm not mistaken. Is it gone? It's gone, hasn't it? Inexplicably. It should also be in any video of mine. It should be. Let me open up our own chat and. Sorry, I'll silence that. And here it is. Here's the Patreon link, guys, which also gets you to the Discord. So let me just post that in here. And there you have it. So do you think NIO have capacity to deliver enough cars with Norway expansion with all these chip problems? Okay, we just sort of talked about that. New factory should increase capacity and delivery numbers. Absolutely. I mean, the existing factory already has at present a capacity of 10,000 cars per month. So we could, in theory, have delivered 10,000 cars a month in April, May, and June, but there aren't enough chips and probably not enough batteries. So they're kind of limited there. Okay, guys, sorry, I scrolled up a little bit too far. Has there been any news on that LinkedIn post from a few months back on exploring the USA market, says Brian there? Well, we've seen a lot of hiring in the US, mainly engineers, software people, autonomous driving people, people responsible for pedestrian safety, all these kind of stuff. So they're hiring. I quite like their system. They're basically going wherever people are smartest for that particular thing. So they're going to Silicon Valley for the software stuff, the sensors, all that AI type stuff, for which obviously Silicon Valley is probably the best place in the world. Then they're going to Munich for some of the engineers, the battery stuff. There are also, of course, a lot of engineers are hired in the US. So at the moment, we're seeing a substantial ramp up there of the presence in Silicon Valley. But that, of course, isn't the same as actually selling cars in the US. So at this point, again, William Lee was asked on that last, and they're saying, well, we have a global expansion plan, but let's talk about Norway and Europe first, basically. My thought is that they will go into probably Vancouver first because, we call it Hongcouver here in Hong Kong because it's, so many Hong Kong people are there. And so therefore a very, very large Cantonese and Chinese community. That's typically where sort of Chinese products go first, and also where kind of the premium kind of greenish EV products go first. Polestar, for example, their North American launch is also in Vancouver. So I think that's likely the place where you see it first. And from there, they'll trickle down that west coast of the US. Right. Okay. Let me, I'm sort of catching up here on all the questions. Thank you very much for all of those. Adrian, you're talking about ARK being a little bit sort of China hostile there. I really don't see that because they're buying loads of Chinese stocks. They have loads of them. Look, they're just buying more JD here. This is just a screenshot today. They are buying loads and loads of Chinese stocks. Actually, they are big into NIO. They're big into JD, big into Tencent. They don't seem to discriminate on the basis of where companies are based. So I imagine there are a lot of investment houses with sort of those sort of issues and restrictions perhaps on outlook, but I actually think that ARK certainly isn't one of those. I haven't got another one up here, but have a look on ARK's portfolio, and I think you'll see that doesn't seem to really apply. Will there be an extraordinary AGM meeting? I read on a forum that'll be one. Yes, there is an extraordinary AGM meeting, and I can pull that up for you again as well. So NIO Investor Relations. A lot of that's going to do with fairly uneventful stuff. So let me just see that here. Extraordinary general meeting. So they are changing the Memorandum and Articles of Association. Let me just open that up here. Of NIO for the 12th time. So it's a fairly common occurrence. It's a bit of a legal, there's a full stop at the end. So what are memorandums and articles of association? Here's the notice. So the notice is basically saying we are amending and restating the Memorandum and Articles of Association, the current MNAA or Mem and Arts, and they're going to be amended in their entirety. What do they really do? Well, they basically define the kind of internal laws of a company. So quorum for board meetings, how many directors, rights of shareholders, voting rights, all sorts of procedures for appointing and replacing directors and general meetings, all that kind of sort of fairly mundane stuff that every company has to deal with. And it seems a little bit odd at first that they would have memorandum and articles of association because it's a very common law system. But the NIO we invest in New York is, of course, a Cayman Islands company, which is a common law sort of a former British jurisdiction. And therefore, you have that. So it also basically talks about A shares, B shares, and C shares. And what will happen is when you sell B and C shares, they will automatically convert into A shares. You see the same thing with Palantir, for example. Often you issue shares to perhaps founders that might have higher voting rights, or you might issue shares to employees or management that are B or C level shares that might have somewhat different rights to the rights that we have as sort of, holders in a contract that gives us access, an underlying right to the Class A ordinary share, because that's essentially what an ADS is. So they're changing that. A lot of that apparently has to also do with the NIO Trust. And the NIO Trust is a major shareholder in NIO. William Lee promised, I think at the IPO, that he would put a third of his shares, and the man still owns 25%, but he had more than that. So he put a third of his shares into NIO Users Trust. And I don't know actually what the terms of that trust are. I have not managed to find that, but it's apparently held for the benefit of NIO users, and they might somehow at some point dish that out as some sort of loyalty scheme or something. I don't know. Perhaps it's also a way to ensure there is sort of it makes takeovers more difficult. It might also be something a little bit like that. But essentially, I think it's a paperwork exercise from what I've seen so far. I don't think there is anything particularly frightening in those changes from what I've read so far. So a lot of that here is, when you basically sell Class B ordinary shares, they will be immediately converted into Class A ordinary shares. I have not looked up what the difference is, to be honest with you, what the voting rights are or anything like that of B shares. But I imagine it's when the insiders sell their B shares and they want them to be tradable on the exchanges, they're going to have to be A shares. It's going to be something like that. So, right. CCAV was a big... So yeah, thank you very much for D for that question there. Robert disagrees with the name changing. Yeah, it's harder to identify people. We should just give you. Also, actually, you should have pictures. Look at Robert. He's got a lovely photo there. He looks very smart, wearing a tie. I think. I think we should encourage that. Minskell said they might go to Sweden afterwards. Yes, that could well be the route after Norway. In fact, you could, from Oslo to Sweden is less than an hour's drive. Felix, when does your model have NIO becoming profitable? Okay, so I'll gladly show you that. So I've got it going profitable in 2022. I haven't done this by quarter because it gets a bit tedious. I think in theory, they could become profitable in the Q4 of this year. But I don't think they care about profit all that much because it's a growth company. They'd rather spend that money on R&D and building new models and rolling out sales infrastructure and swapping stations and more NIO houses and hiring more salespeople and all that sort of stuff. So I don't think profit, therefore, is the immediately short-term goal. Otherwise, I think it would be achievable this year. I think it'll come next year. It won't be a massive amount of profitability, I don't think, but it will be there likely, I think. Mitch is saying, do you think the connection parts used to do the battery swapping will eventually be an issue for NIO cars, possibly being a complaint further down the line for NIO customers, says Mitch. Excuse me. Apologies. I mean, we haven't seen any mention of that, to be honest with you. With all the early start issues they had, that has not been something that's been mentioned. They've done, I can't remember how many battery swaps, but a lot of them. And it doesn't seem to be, so far, I've not read a single social media blog or anything like that out there. There's always somebody critical out there, so normally you would hear that, but I have not seen that so far. Peter's saying Vancouver, lots of very high-end vehicles, they're a good choice. Exactly, it's also a very affluent area. And as I say, very, very strong Cantonese or Chinese presence there. So any discussions on how the highway taxes associated with ICEs will be managed with the EVs? I have not heard. So Michael, you're talking, I think for the question, you're sort of talking about this theory that petrol taxes or, whatever car taxes essentially pay for the highways. If we get rid of all that, we don't get petrol taxes anymore, right? That there will be an issue down the road, and you know what? There will be a higher tax on electricity or something. Governments will always tax something when they lose an old tax. So I think this tax advantage phase, it'll be a phase and it'll get replaced. And they might have all sorts of taxes that they'll come up with over the time. Okay, EL, you're doing some clever maths there on delivery numbers. Thank you. CP is suggesting governments might charge you by the mile by usage. You know what? Actually, that would be pretty fair, wouldn't it? I think, and in a sense, similar to a petrol tax, I suppose. I think that is a possibility indeed, because once we're all autonomously driven, there is data, right? They know exactly where we've been, how long we've been there, and therefore you might see perhaps also smarter pricing, where you are able to direct traffics a little bit more easily. Robert is sharing with us here that Nouveau Monde is going to be trading on the New York Stock Exchange any day now, and PLL also will be in the Russell 2000 very soon, once they're re-domiciled from Australia to the US. Thank you very much for sharing that there, Robert. I can't wait for both of those. That would be rather lovely. Monday, I'll be buying my standard ETF and some Flow, NIO, Baidu, SQ, New, TAN, and NIO. Make sure you don't mix up all those three-letter words starting with N there, Gamal, but thank you for sharing that. Your name change is a little bit confusing. I agree with Robert on that front. Andrew, thank you very much. You're welcome. Good to you to join. Are you bullish on cannabis, says Jeff? Yes and no. I think I'm long-term bullish on it. I think it is as a product, it's going to be very successful. I think also from a sort of medicinal point of view, and a lot of the hemp and CBD applications and stuff, I think that's all fantastic. My cat's on CBD, fantastic product for seizures. That's of course not medical advice, but the trouble with it is I think that you have very high valuations for stocks. You have a not certain federal level. You have slight improvements, but is Biden really going to put his neck out and really change this law? I don't know. I think it's going to stay a state-by-state basis. The US laws for cannabis are almost as bad as the US liquor laws, horribly complicated, and typically require some sort of a local processing, local supply chain. Very, very difficult, therefore, to get economies of scale. So just because you grow and your market gets bigger, if your costs per item actually increase because you have to build all that local infrastructure everywhere in each state, it isn't such a wonderful business at that point. So I keep looking at this about once a year, and I dig around for a couple of weeks for the sort of a really, really good companies with great valuations, and I kind of struggle with it, I must say. Devin, I'm German originally, but thank you very much for the comment there on the accent. It is some sort of funny twang. I've been in Hong Kong here, though, for the last, 15 years. NIO is hiring in the UK too, Genie X, absolutely. I pulled that up here earlier. I mean, this is just the job ads for today, two in Oxford, where they do vehicle concept engineering. I think there's a lot of expertise out there. BMW's Mini site is also out there, right? And then in Munich, we are hiring here this EU service coordinator, which I'm rather excited about because it means a more wider Europe expansion coming sooner than I thought. Does this model account for growth in Chinese middle class and potential market increase as a result, says Alan? Look, I mean, at the moment, China buys about 21 million cars a year. That's expected to go up to about 25 million. I don't put in here a middle class sort of sedan that's cheaper, the sort of secondary brand we're expecting NIO to launch. Why don't I put it in? Because I don't know when it's going to come. I don't know what the margins will be. I don't know the price points. I don't know how many they're going to sell. So it's hard to model. It's already you got to go fairly random, and you can see what I do with that. I sort of am fairly bullish up to 2025, and after that I just basically stop my growth. Why? Because visibility just isn't there. You just don't know until we get international expansion and get a view of, how we'll roll out. Is Europe going to be 30% of NIO's sales? maybe not. We just don't know at this point, right? So there are a lot of unknowns there. So therefore, I like to flatline things out. The other way of doing models, which is what a lot of analysts do, you pick random numbers. Literally, you just click on a random number generator in Excel, and you just get some good years, some bad years, and you sort of zigzag around. I kind of prefer to do what I think might be foreseeable. And for me to get up to sort of 1 point something million cars in China, just in China, is possible for NIO at these kind of price points. Why? Because BMW sells something like 800,000 cars a year, Mercedes 750,000, Audi also 700 to 800,000 cars, and they're all at these sort of price points. So therefore, a Chinese premium brand with this sort of national sentiment, etc., I think it's entirely possible for them to sell 1.1 million cars in China alone. So I don't really look at the other stuff yet. That's to come, I suppose, at some point. So yeah, thank you very much for that question, though. Steve, Steve is saying we should be elated about the NOP and larger capacity batteries trending higher. Yes, and you know what? Customers are going to want to pay for them. Robert is saying, what's your view on why the market is going down despite blowout earnings from Amazon, Apple, etc.? Well, is the market really going down, Robert? I mean, I think that's kind of the real question. Is just have a look at, let me pull this up. Let me pull this up. Have a look at QQQ and go out a little bit. I'm not going to go back, to the beginning of time, but just look at that chart. This is since September or so, say May last year or so. This is pretty much it's pretty much that, right? It's basically going up continuously at more or less the same pace. And yeah, you get some outliers. You go up a bit high, you go low a bit high. You can actually also do this if you change the moving average lines to 100 days. I think that is a fantastic way to buy QQQ. Buy whenever it drops below the 100-day line. That's what I do. I'm not recommending you do, but you can see here my two black circles. That's when I buy QQQ. That's the only time when I buy QQQ, because at that point, I know I'm getting a bargain. So I actually don't really see the sell-off. I think the numbers are fantastic. Of course, we have brilliant tech numbers here from Apple, from Amazon, a lot of these guys, and Facebook, etc. And I hold most of those stocks, so I'm very happy about that. And I don't think that those are COVID-related increases. I think once people are buying on Amazon, once people are advertising on Facebook, they're not going to go back because it's just a better service than what they experienced before. Steve is saying, I'd assume 2023 models will have more advanced sensors to support better NOP. Yeah, it's going to be a continuous improvement there. There will also be better tech, better batteries, all that stuff, of course, down the road. And I think with that, each time a chance to charge higher and higher subscription fees, because people who are spending that amount of money on cars are not that price sensitive. They just want the best and they're happy to pay for it. So I think it's a good place to be. Jamal here saying the biggest challenge is to have big electricity storage or peak shaving. Absolutely. And we're seeing different, both Tesla and Volkswagen are essentially pitching a similar story here. Tesla is saying use our solar walls, our in-house batteries to feed the grid and sort of balance it out. And Volkswagen is saying connect the car to the house, and the car will be the battery. Both, I think, reasonably viable models to basically, save the grid having to build an absolutely enormous battery storage. Be interesting to see how China handles the same thing as well. They will find a model, and I think they will roll it out rather quickly. Flynn is saying, I'm skeptical about space and cost needed for battery swapping. It looks like a luxury service. And exactly it is. It's a luxury service. And that is precisely why I think it's good for NIO. It's like, you buy an Apple iPhone, you pay $300 for those little earbud thingies that, you can buy from a no-name brand for $50. Why? Because it's Apple and people buying it, they got $300, or at least they want it so badly that they find $300 somewhere. So that's exactly the point. I think eventually for charging, that use model will sort of filter out as the batteries get bigger and charging will get quicker. But the ability to have the latest battery have NIO maintain it for you, and not have to worry about degrading batteries and always having the latest battery tech, people are going to want to pay for that. That's just my thought. And people, who's going to want to pay for that? Those with the highest disposable income, and those people buy luxury cars, and NIO makes luxury cars, essentially. Not actually... William Lee always says he doesn't like the word luxury because luxury sort of implies Rolls-Royce or Bentley or something, who sell very few. So premium is the word he seems to prefer. Disbalanced prices are higher than electricity prices. Yeah, there is the grids, the electricity grids will have to be completely overhauled. I agree with you there. Jeff's asking, how bad is COVID in Hong Kong? We have pretty much 0 local cases. We have 1 or 2 sometimes. We have about 10 flying in each day. But if you fly into Hong Kong, be warned, we have 3-week quarantine, mandatory, in government-nominated hotels, which are, well, there is 1 5-star, the rest are not. And you can't leave your room, and nobody can visit you, and nobody will come inside and clean it. You are locked in your room, and you get room service sort of type food put outside, and that's it. And you can't leave it for 3 weeks, and you get tested all the bloody time. So, and if you are positive, you get tested on arrival too. If you are positive, you get put immediately into a COVID camp. You're going to be in some sort of container. So Hong Kong takes this very, very seriously. They want to have 0 cases, because when we have 0 cases for 3 weeks, the promise is that the border to mainland China will get reopened, which is of course important for business here. So very, very different mentality here to say the US or in Europe, where I saw the UK today saying, oh, 1 in 1,000 Brits have COVID. That's fantastic. Let's open everything. In Hong Kong, like we literally have, I think we had 0 cases today, and you know, we are still a city of 7.5 million people, so incredibly low numbers. But the government wants 0, so it's going to be pretty severe here in terms of restrictions. But in a sense, I mean, it doesn't really affect us all that much. It's just travel is out of the question. Joel, thank you. Welcome to the call. Market down, crude. If you only invest in one, it would be Palantir or NIO, says Imam Bassoon there. That's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I don't recommend anybody invests in just one stock. And I know I'm kind of slightly skirting around your question here. I just don't think it makes sense. I think there is more than one great company. I think there is more than one great growth stock. And I think there is more than one great sector out there. And why would I invest only in one when I can invest in 2 or 5 or perhaps 10? Now, you could probably make a list of 10 stocks and leave it at that. I think that's pretty easy. Not easy, but that's reasonable to do. But just the one, I wouldn't really recommend it. I know some of you guys, sometimes people share and say, I've got 100% in NIO. And okay, that's great. And I like your conviction. I like that you are researching and spending all your effort on one company. Nothing really wrong with that. But it just gives you quite a lot of volatility that you could probably avoid without shaving that much of your returns in the long run. Richard, great to have you on the call. I think it'll explode in the 4th or the first quarter. Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I'm still hoping that in beginning of Q3, we are going to get the words we've all been waiting for, and that says William Lee comes on and says I took a bath this morning in a warehouse full of chips, and then the world will be a better place. How will NIO deal with those degraded batteries? Is asking Shunjing Li here. Yes, that is totally. I agree with you. That is an expense down the road. Batteries lose their life cycle at some point, so they will go back to CATL and they'll recycle them in some form or another. NIO Power and the unit that does the battery as a service, CATL is also an investor. You are, the battery manufacturer, really. So it is a cost, but they are charging a premium for the batteries, and they're charging a premium for the subscription, and they're leveraging that subscription business. So actually, the returns on that are actually pretty positive. But it is a cost, I agree with you. And if you are wanting to make a $25,000 car like Tesla, then it doesn't work because you can't afford it. If you're selling your cars at 60, 70, 80,000 US dollars, then yes, you can afford it. And you have consumers who are willing to pay relatively high subscription fees for that. What do you think on Xpeng? And Lee says Eleftherios here. I think both solid companies. I think they'll both do well. both a little bit less on the brand side. They are more building solid companies. Li is more the kind of family car, if you know what I mean. They will probably be profitable this year. I think they are the ones closest to that, but a little bit less there on the international expansion. The whole brand remit is a little bit more narrow, but I think very solid companies. What do you think of the potential for NIO to operate and sell in India, says Shoeless Joe? I think it's going to come, but it's somewhere down the road, because India has fairly stringent foreign investment laws. If you want to get a license to sell cars in India, you need to manufacture in India. So I kind of don't think that's the first stopping place for them. I mean, even look at Tesla, right? That was sort of not the first priority for them either. It was sort of priority number 3 or 4 or 5. So if you look at where the most EVs are sold in the world, it's number 1, China, second is Europe, and third is North America. So I think that is kind of the logical order. There are also some political issues between India and China, which may or may not make that the greatest investment at this particular point in time. In a pessimistic view, how much do you think NIO stock will get in 6 months or maybe in a year? I think if you wanted to be a pessimist, I think you would basically say we're going to hover around where we are now, because we're only going to make 7,000 cars each month, which would still get us to 84, 85,000, 86,000 by the end of the year, which wouldn't be that far off what most analysts expect, sort of 92, 93,000 cars a year. And you just say, yeah, flatlining, and they just can't seem to grow. That would be a view, and you'd have to somehow shut your eyes to any future improvement in 2022, and you'd have to ignore the fact that the ET7 is going to come out, which should have pretty great margins. So I kind of think if you are conservative on this, you could say, okay, I don't think until the end of the year the chip issue is going to get resolved at all, and therefore I'm going to flatline. I think that would be the pessimistic case here. I'm sort of hopefully optimistic that we will see an improvement in the chip landscape in Q3 and Q4 for NIO. Probably not for Ford or for GM, because they're not going to be willing to pay a lot more for those chips. But NIO can, as I say, NIO could pay double for those dollar chips and still make a pretty good margin. Jamal there is saying copper prices are surging. Yeah, I mean, we are moving to an electric world, right? What is it all going to be run on? Copper. So copper is a good one. Do you think any American EVs will do battery swapping? Well, you see some of those startups in the US, right? You see them doing that. I think if you are more of a premium EV, so perhaps somebody like a Lucid or some sort of premium brand, it might make sense, maybe an Apple car or something like that, where people are willing to pay more for the latest tech. And that's also, I think, something to bear in mind. The NIO consumer probably has the latest phone, the latest, Mac, whatever. So therefore, they're not going to want to drive around with a battery that's 3 years old. So I think that's kind of where the advantage comes in, is being able to give your consumers a better service, the latest technology, and the ability to upsell them with each of those stocks. Marcel, if you just joined us, the NIO numbers, let me show you on my spreadsheet here. I've just typed them up at the beginning of this. You can see here, April numbers, 7,102 cars delivered, which is 2% down on March. But it is basically within expectations. We've been told we're going to get 21 to 22,000 cars for the quarter, for Q2. So 7,100 times 3 gets us pretty much bang on that target. So basically, everybody seems to be rather happy with those numbers. Thank you for that question there, Marcel. Guys, if you have any other questions, do shout them out. I will otherwise, of course, do some more NIO coverage over the weekend. There is quite a bit of stuff and news out there. So do hop over also to our Discord channel, guys. We have a lovely NIO channel here, of course, also. Lots of other things, of course, too. But yeah, Adam's wondering if there's a positive effect on the stock price in the coming week. I think it just sort of shows that it's, the forecast we've been given is solid, so therefore we don't seem to need to worry all that much. Marcel says that's awesome. I hope they accomplish that. I think we are going to get those 21 to 22,000 numbers. I'm kind of hoping that they're lowballing that, and I'm hoping we're going to get if we get 22,800 or we get 23,000, I think that would make a big difference to the market, because everyone's going to be like, NIO beats expectations. You don't have to beat it by a lot. You just have to beat it by a little. So that's, I think, quite a good one there. In the future, what services could you see added to a battery swap station? Yeah, I don't really, I'm not a huge fan of running a sort of a petrol station business, because margins are horrific. So I think it is more that they'll license out the technology, and that's a revenue stream, or they might just manufacture the battery packs for other companies. That's a revenue stream. And then each time, say, a Chinese made Ford with battery swaps their battery, NIO will obviously charge a fee for that, right? So there is potentially a sort of charge point style revenue there, with a bit more of a moat, because to build a battery swap station is substantially more expensive than to build a charge point. So it's something. It could turn NIO Power into more of a standalone business than it is at present. Jack is saying, if you had 10K to invest, what 1 or 2 stocks would you put it in? I would say Facebook and Microsoft. And that's no disrespect to NIO or anything else, but it's just, if you're only going to buy 2 stocks, you're going to want to buy stocks with high margins, near dominant market position. You want good growth, good free cash flow, and a history of long-term growth and foreseeable growth continuing, certainly in the double digits. And those 2, for me, certainly tick that box. And I think if you did that, you are very likely to get nice double-digit returns every year. And you just leave it there; it'll compound, and your money will grow very, very nicely. That would be what I would say. Though, Jack, what I would really recommend is, if you only had 10K, I'd invest that 10K, and then I'd save somehow a couple of $100 extra each month, and I'd keep investing that every month, because that's really how you make money. Shoeless Joe, random question. I like random questions. Africa, okay, massive, relatively young population. How do you see the development there? Huge boon for consumer staples. Mobile phones, all that kind of tech stuff, of course, anything sort of 5G related, that's a big item for them, because they're not going to build a traditional phone network. They're not going to bother. They're going to jump past that. I think consumer goods are a big growth story there. Exclude all the sort of mining and sugar and all that stuff. That's kind of the old stuff that might do well too. But I think consumer goods is probably the one place I would look at for African investment. Any idea when the Hong Kong listing will happen? Is that the reason they moved up earnings? They didn't really move up earnings. It's typically when they do it. So we got the earnings on the 1st of March, and then we got it on the 29th of April, right? So it's pretty much on track. Rumor has it that August is Hong Kong listing. That's the rumor I'm hearing at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't do it more quickly. But I think at the moment, the regulatory oversight might just be a little bit more stringent than normal. Normally, a dual listing, if you're already listed in New York and you want to list in Hong Kong, they basically say, welcome, wonderful, when do you want to list? Monday? And it's pretty much as easy as that. But at the moment, the whole financial industry listings, all that, and staff and everything, I think has regulators a little bit going through things more carefully. So August seems to be the date that people are sort of bouncing around here. Peak shaving on charging stations. Come on there. Okay. You're getting ready for the big stock market crash. OMG, juicy returns on its way. Every dip is an opportunity. Jeremy said there's going to be a big growth stock crash this summer. What's your opinion on that? If bond yields hit 2%, because at the moment we've forgotten about bond yields, right? Everyone's just like, bond yields, never mind. We've kind of forgotten the whole story. Let me just show you here. Where is our bond yields here? That 10-year bond yield. We have been, let's get a proper chart up here. We were up here in sort of 181, something like that land, right? That's the US 10-year. And now we've fallen off. Everyone's just like, inflation? What inflation were you talking about? People have just forgotten it temporarily. And that just shows the sort of how erratic the market is. The market overreacts, then it corrects itself, it overreacts. But when we break, I mean, the 170, the 180, I think everyone's going to be like, yeah, okay, we've been here before, who cares? When it goes through 2, I think it'll be a big psychological mark, and I think we're going to see a big sell-off in growth stocks. But I think it'll be a fairly short-lived drop, because we've had this drop before, and let me throw QQQ in here together, and then you can see both. Let me make the other one also a line chart, so it's a little easier to see lines. And then we're going to hide all the annotations and all that stuff up here too. Moving average lines, all of it. Go away. Here we go. So you can see QQQ is the Nasdaq here in orange. So as we had, okay, now my annotations can't come back in. Can I delete them all? I can bin them, right? Yeah, wonderful. So as we went up this trajectory here from sort of 110, we went up to 140 pretty quickly. That's what spooked the market, and that's what caused us to go in this direction. But then we kind of shrugged it off, and we were like, 1 point something percent, maybe 2% inflation, who cares? And we went off on our trajectory again, and now we are rallying again. And they have been moving together all this time, right? So I think we're going to see the same thing again happen. You are going to get a bit of a dip. Last time it was from 330 to 300, 10%. It was a 10% sell-off of the QQQ. Now, of course, things like Tesla and NIO and whatever else had been going up more than 1,000% the previous year gets hit hardest. So they will again react more. Quite frankly, I think great buying opportunity, because if you have a bit of patience, it'll just sort of recover itself. At least that's my take on it. But you can't predict a crash. You can't. Harry Dent's leading crash indicator is Bitcoin, says Jeff. Well, I mean, Harry Dent he's a very entertaining chap. I am sometimes watch him for pleasure, sort of strange pleasure, really. Every single time I hear him, he says, "It's the world is coming to an end. It's all going to stop tomorrow. Are you ready? Buy 30-year government bond yields." Well, if you'd done that, if you'd listened, he said that since the beginning of the year, right? Let me show you the US 30-year bonds. So he was saying that we should buy this. He said that's going to absolutely explode. You're going to make so much money. He's been saying that since the beginning of the year. And at the beginning of the year, it was, in fairness, it was at 1.6. So let's look at that in percentage terms. How much money would we have made? We would have made 39%, actually. Not bad. Yeah, not bad. So people are taking notice. People are listening to it. But I think largely this is the inflation story. This is not really, I think, necessarily the world's coming to an end. Harry Dent take on things. I agree with him on the sense that he says, the Federal Reserve and the governments are all sissies. They're no longer willing to give us a recession. And for that very reason, I don't think we are going to get major corrections, because every time we do, they're just going to start printing a bit more money, and then we are flying again. Buy every month? Absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. I do it absolutely every month. I normally do it on about the 4th of the month after I've done my books, and that is what I do no matter what happens. And how do you invest during a stock market crash? You buy the good stuff. And you keep buying it. That's really the sensible thing to do. I mean, if you want to see, an example of what to buy, look at last March. That was a prime example. Fantastic quality, good, highly profitable companies with great free cash flow, lots of cash in the bank, great margins, sold off 30%. What's the sense in it? So you just buy those. Jeff's just saying, if Bitcoin coin dumps, stocks will follow. He says, yeah, there is a bit of a correlation. Again, why don't we throw that up here? BTC USD. Let's use the Coinbase one. And then we compare that to QQQ, because that will be kind of the nearest comparison point here. Hang on. New price scale. Where did my QQQ go? Here it is. So again, let me get rid of all my squiggles. And let's see. Do you see an inverse relationship between the two? Not really, right? So they are somewhat correlated. except that look at the Bitcoin sort of mini sell-off here that people got very excited about. That went from, I've got everything in percentage terms. Hang on, no, I don't. So we went from, 63, we went down to 48, 49, which is 63 minus 49 is 14 over 63. That was 22%. I think you just got to expect a 30% correction, I'd say, once or twice a year. I think that's just normal for Bitcoin, for the volatility. What did the market do? Well, the market sold off a little bit. The market went from 341 to 335. Not really very much, right? So, yeah, there is a bit of correlation here, but it isn't terribly strong, I would say. We also had QQQ selling off here in early March, and Bitcoin rallied, and people were saying, oh my God, this is the safe haven now, it's gold now. And then you have the opposite happening. So I think Bitcoin is a lot more sentiment, and I hold Bitcoin. I'm not against Bitcoin, but I think it's a little bit too early to sort of say one causes the other one to move. Typically, when there are jitters, when there are tech jitters, both of them sell off a bit. Tell us about your course. I want to support your community. Thank you very much, Wabi Sabi there. So I'm launching the course on Monday for the wider world on YouTube, guys. It's already our Discord and Patreon members are already on there. Also, our Patreon members get 50% off. So it takes it from $6.99 to $3.49, I think, something like that. And it basically teaches you how to master stocks, how to build lasting wealth, how to invest, how to pick stocks, how to do your own discount cash flow models. Yes, there are templates in there, and I explain exactly how to do it. Technical analysis from basics to advanced, how I invest, how you can turn $700 a month into more than 600,000 US dollars without taking any substantial risks. Lots of things on that line, really to help people and all of you guys to build lasting wealth for yourself or for your family and just become independent, financially free and independent, and you can do whatever you like with your life without having to take crazy risks. You don't have to throw all your money on Bitcoin to build wealth. Now, you can, of course, but it is a very, very high risk strategy. There are other things you can buy, and you can get very predictable returns in a much more calmer way, and you'll sleep much better. So check that out, guys. Watch this space. I will announce it for the YouTube community on Monday. If you are in a rush and you want to get it for half price, then hop over to the Discord, to the Patreon, and you'll see it there. And you can, of course, also message me there, ask me questions anytime, day and night. Mark and Marcel is asking, what's your opinion on the Biden taxes? Will that influence the market big time in 2020 or no? The capital gains taxes. So capital gains taxes, of course, are not great for traders or investors. So you might see if it does come in, and the US democratic system is a fairly complex one. So just because Biden announces this, he doesn't mean he's going to get this. He's probably going to get something down here. It's going to get watered down by negotiation because his majority is one, right? So all it takes is for one guy to go, yeah, I don't really like it. My voters don't really love tax increases. And there will be some democratic state somewhere with high incomes. I don't know, Massachusetts or something, and they're not going to want higher taxes. So I think it'll get watered down substantially. Having said that, if it does come in as in higher capital gains taxes, it probably will to some level. Expect a bit more volatility before the end of the tax year in the US. A lot of people will want to realize their gains under the old rates. And then after that, I think I just expect a lot more shenanigans, people structuring their investments in a way to kind of optimize their tax rates. I think in the long run, it doesn't really affect things that much. People just sort of shrug it off. People get used to taxation. In the short run, there will be a bit more volatility. Minsker saying the rich are not going to liquidate and never invest again to avoid taxes. No, exactly. They're going to do what they can to optimize it, and that might be corporate structures, trusts, all sorts of things. But no, I agree with you there that they are going to keep investing because if you're getting a return and you're paying a bit more tax, you're still getting a return. And Richard, you're absolutely right. One Democratic senator can block all of it. Or, I imagine, basically, my understanding is all the senators, they have their home turf to defend, and they will all ask for special little things for this and that. So it'll become a mammoth monster of a bill that probably achieves a fraction of what Biden wants and a load of other stuff that we didn't really particularly care about. Joe Manson there. Okay. What do you think of QuantumScape? Do they have a future? Maybe to Germany, as Brian Wolf there. Yeah, QS is, I think it's a good company. I don't think it's particularly cheap. I suppose that's the one thing I would throw out. Let me just show you some numbers here. But yeah, at the moment, anything related with EVs and battery technology and that sort of thing, of course, has pretty lofty valuations. But let me show you. We got some multiples on here. What did I want? I wanted some multiples. Okay, they're not making money, so PE ratio isn't particularly useful. They're not. Let me see. Hang on. Financials. What do we want? Valuation ratios. Here we are. Here we go. Found it. So EV over EBITDA minus 180. That's not going to help. Price to book. Actually, that's only 13 times. I'm not personally invested in it. I would say to you, I think it is a not risk-free one, if I can put it that way, because I do think it isn't particularly cheap, but it's probably going to do well over some period. And you can see that you see the amount of sell-off that they experienced. They went from 132 down to 40. In the end of December, and then again in Feb they went up to 72, and then they went low as 37. So they halved in value there. So it is certainly a not a risk-free stock. I would definitely say that here. And the recovery hasn't been particularly great, right? So we have here one low, we have another one here, we have sort of one there, and then one here. But the pattern is kind of trending downwards, and that's not really what you want to see, right? You are kind of here on this movement, and then if you connect our peaks here, again, it isn't narrowing all that much, but it's it's not the prettiest story really. Or you could also take it from sort of, hang on. All right, let me get rid of this one. Can we move this one over? So if we connected those highs instead on a more short-term basis, then you can sort of see you can kind of get a feel for the trajectory here. If it breaks out above that triangle, it would have to recover, I would sort of say, at least 53 to really get some momentum back here. And then again, it'll have a pretty tough time at 64. So I would watch out for movement upwards, certainly below the lows here in the sort of 40s, but really you need to go up about $53 or so. Steinrod is saying, if inflation remains and therefore an interest rate hike, could more companies turn to Palantir to save money for the likes of R&D rather than trying to borrow money at higher rates? So you're saying if you did your R&D in a more sort of using your data kind of AI sort of sense, yeah, I mean, it's a fairly complex thought there, Steinrod. I mean, I think I don't think we're going to get much inflation. I just don't see it. I don't really know where it would come from. You'd have to get some serious wage growth. That would really be the only place I think that would come from. Okay, Adrian is a fan of high taxes. All right, fair enough. Albarello, hello everyone. Thanks for all your little fluffy animals here. Thank you for the kind comments and the analysis, guys. I think on that note, guys, I will wrap it up here. I encourage you, come and check out our Discord and our Patreon, guys. It is only $15 a month. That is 50 cents a day. And that is my special offer here. It gives you the same access as the $23.95 tier. It also gives you my course for half the price. And of course, lots of access to all the research, the discounted cash flow models, everything else, and our Discord channel where I share all my thoughts, everything I see, and you can chat with me. You can ask me questions, and you can reach me that way. Check out some of our testimonials. They are really lovely and fantastic. Thank you guys for writing those. I didn't ask for it. You just write lovely things all the time, and sometimes I see it and copy and paste it. So check that out, guys. It's a lovely research-based community. We don't just sort of jump up and down Reddit style and shout to the moon. We do a little bit more than that, I would say. Although there are, of course, fantastic forums and Reddit too. I don't want to diss that. But guys, thank you very much for joining, and I will see you on the next video. Make sure you set reminders for all those lives coming up. Lots of excitement coming up here. We've got the NIO Europe press launch. We've got Palantir earnings on the 11th, Alibaba earnings on the 13th. So plenty of good stuff to look forward to there. So see you on those videos, guys. Thanks.